Well, here we go. It is Now and Next. Another week. All set to go here. This week, we're going to get into grassroots politics in Toronto and how that has changed things somewhat. The Big Mac attack. RFK is going to take care of your health and well-being while he's chowing down on McDonald's. That's a fun one. Who else is on Bluesky social? Been a bit of a migration. Fair number of folks switching over post-election in the United States from X, Twitter to Bluesky. So I dipped in this week and found a lot of you are there. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And you'd pay $1 million for a banana taped to the wall, would you? Yeah, that and more coming up right here on Now and Next. And of course, this is the fun part. We're bringing in our regular crew. We're going to talk about issues of the day. Anne-Marie Akins is here from Curious Public. And Bob Broadway Reed is with us as well. And we've got the Queen of Hums, Lindsay Broadhead, and Brad fucking Ross is here with us to round out the cast. That is the comms and strategy team here on Now and Next. And they drop into the show every couple of weeks. And we tend to, have a pile of stuff to talk about. So shall we? Let's bring them all in and see what we've got to lend to the programming today. I just want to start off by saying we did a live show last week in front of an audience for the Public Affairs Association of Canada. And we're going to actually produce that and post it in our regular feed in the coming weeks. But just generally, thoughts from the crew in terms of how that felt. It's the first time we have all been in the same room together and made eye contact, if nothing else.
Well, I loved it. It was really nice to see the audience, and it made me want to do more of those live things. It's you really do connect with each other and with an audience much more effectively.
Yeah, somebody was saying, Brad, you were the only guy they knew that was brave enough to interrupt me. So I thought, well, that it worked.
It allowed for that engagement, I think. But this feels, this is the way pods are now. I mean, you can do it from anywhere in the world, but of course, it also feels a little bit like a Zoom call in, COVID 2020. But I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was fun.
Well, even at some point, I felt like you were interviewing me, Bob.
That was my defense mechanism. When in doubt, ask Dave something.
Can we use that today? That's a good strategy all the time.
Well, by all means. Yeah. No, but I think you made the point earlier before we came on, Lindsay, that it allows for, at least the in-person allows for more of a responsive reaction to what's being said. In some cases, that's sort of limited by how you are sitting around. In this case, we were sitting in the lounge chairs, but I still think it worked. I thought it was good to be able to kind of look at each other and react in the moment.
There's a lot of great people there too.
Back from you. I once at one point grabbed the microphone back from you, so
yeah,
it allows you to do that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it was it was a bit of an eye opener for the comms folks in the room to get not my take on it, but I think what you guys brought to the table, each of you had your own example of why podcasting isn't just, this kind of fancy glitzy thing in the political era that we're into right now. But from a comms perspective, it really does work in terms of the overall strategy. So I don't want to, draw the curtain back too far. We'll get into it in an upcoming episode, but it will be live from the Public Affairs Association of Canada. That was the gathering at George Brown. First time I'd been down to the new campus there. So anyway, it was kind of cool.
Beautiful.
Brought this to your attention this week. The story about the latest City Hall by-election, and of course it gained a whole lot of noise and attraction because Anthony Furey was among those who was on the ballot, and two things were happening there that sort of caught the headlines. So on the one hand, Premier Wynne, Kathleen Wynne, was supporting one candidate, and Tim Hudak was supporting Mr. Furey. And of course, we have Wynne and Hudak on the ledge. So it was an interesting dynamic to see how they were playing out. But what I found fascinating in all of this was more of the point that this was getting right back to grassroots politics and the ability to, change voter behavior, voter attitudes. And Bob, you live in the riding, right? You live in that ward?
Yeah.
So,
it's my ward. So I saw the signs everywhere. I saw the coordinated "Stop Furey at all costs" movement. Vote for anybody but him. All kinds of things. Lawn signs that looked like his, but had fine print at the bottom that were negative against him. I've never seen anything like it in any municipal race. Really, in provincial races, you don't see an individual candidate being targeted like that by an organized movement. And that's what this was. And I take exception at those who say, well, this is the new shape of grassroots politics at the local level. I don't think anything's grassroots when you've got a coordinated, funded to a degree, organization that is deliberately going after one candidate versus the rest of the field to try and skew the outcome. And Anthony Furey himself has been very clear about this in follow-up media interviews. He says, if it was not voter suppression, it was certainly vote manipulation, all aimed at one candidate out of the field. So I find that troubling. I mean, flip the table, and if it was a conservative organization that was gunning for someone on the left side of the spectrum, there would be, I think, a lot more hue and cry than there's been about this in the aftermath.
But we've kind of opened this can of worms, though, haven't we, Anne-Marie? I mean, this is going to happen now. This is going to be the playbook.
Well, you know what I find surprising, because with all due respect, Bob, this has been happening for a very long time, especially on the right. We've had Ontario Proud, Canada Proud, True North, Rebel News, all gunning after a more progressive or left-wing or even liberal candidates in a very organized way. They perhaps don't do it on such a grassroots, on the ground level with volunteers creating signs and that sort of thing. That part I'll give you is unique. But as for the official, there is a way to become an official political group to be able to lobby your constituents to vote in a certain direction. That's been going on for ages on the right. So it's not surprising that the left has picked up that kind of tactic.
Well, three words the other way: Working Families Coalition, who we've seen in the last couple of provincial elections, who are a well-funded third-party organization that go gunning for the Conservatives. So, yeah, I'm not saying this has never happened before, but when we see it, particularly at the city level, where allegedly there are no partisan politics, when you've got an organized group like this coming in, I say you might as well open up the field to partisan politics at City Hall, which personally I'm not in favor of, because I think that automatically draws lines in the sand and prevents different viewpoints from working together more easily as they otherwise would in a nonpartisan environment. But in the name of transparency, I think there's got to be just a greater degree of that when somebody with a big steamroller like that rolls into an open election campaign.
But isn't the answer, Bob, then to make sure that it's party driven? Because then at least you can put limits and say the party can only spend this much and the third party can only spend that much. And that's kind of what happens at Queen's Park. Yeah. That's where the guardrails are. Whether you like, the new legislation or not, doesn't matter. But at the city, there isn't really any guardrail.
Right. And that is the problem, the crux of it, and that is one solution, is to officially make it party status. I'd like to find another way around that.
Yeah, so what do you do, Lindsay? I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's what Bob just hit on in terms of its connection to the municipal government is what draws my attention too. My mom lives in the riding, and she received the memos in the mail. And so that message sticks. And it was interesting to watch it cascade out the media picked it up. So every time Anthony Furey was on the radio, he was on 1010 all the time. He was put on the defensive, right? So the journalist would say, you know, we're bringing you in. We want you to talk about your campaign, but we also want you to defend against this accusation. So I think there is also a space here where, you know, what is the validity of that particular accusation? But the grassroots tactic of the whole thing was perfectly executed insofar as it spurned the discussion. It planted a seed in voters' minds, and the right kind of voters, right? They were targeting particularly conservative voters. And then that elevated right into all the other news cycles. So, you know, when we're talking about podcasting, when we're talking about all these kinds of medias, what they did tactically was genius. The connection to the municipal piece, though, is fascinating because, you know, grassroots implies to a degree those without power, right? And I don't think we should kid ourselves, right? The chief of staff used to run Progress Toronto. Progress Toronto is also what pushed in, you know, and defended Olivia Chow's nomination, which she was very successful in, as well as a couple of the councillors who sit in very powerful seats. So to Bob's point, there is an interesting confusion or watering down between this definition of what municipal nonpartisan politics is, and then the other orders of government. And I really am bothered by the notion of partisan politics in municipal government.
Except, Brad, that if there was a party at City Hall, it's probably the NDP, and that's the 100%. Basis of what we've been talking about here. That progressive side, it's an NDP infrastructure, and I put that in lowercase letters. I'm not suggesting that the party was necessarily behind it officially.
The NDP has always been the most organized, if you will, at the municipal level, going back, you know, to the Metro days and pre-amalgamation. I want to, you know, let's take this grassroots metaphor a step further, and I'll say the landscape has changed. You know, we've talked about this in terms of, you know, other tactics like podcasting. We've talked about how people are winning elections, and Progress Toronto, to their credit, I think have come on to something that nobody else has yet. And I think, as we saw in that, if you read that Star story, I think you'll see from councillors like Brad Bradford and others on the right are looking at it themselves. So I think we're going to see you know, more of this from across the political spectrum. And so, you know, to Bob's point and to Lindsay's point, you know, maybe we need, you know, there's got to be some guardrails now, perhaps. I don't know. I think there are some. But, you know, it's also up to voters to educate themselves and inform themselves about what they're seeing out there in terms of, you know, whether it's political advertising or door knocking and brochures and all the rest of it. Progress Toronto, they won. I mean, they won the day in terms of this. And so I think we need to be mindful of being overly critical of that. They did what they set out to do, and in politics, who said it's supposed to be you know, all nice and fair? It's they did what they needed to do.
That I think, Brad, you're absolutely right. They hit it out of the park. Like, this isn't a critique. I think it's a actual. It's job well done, right? Grassroots politics and municipal politics, they go hand in glove. For me, it's just about the transparency, right? Let's call a spade, and understand who's pushing certain messages and why. And when you have accusations like the tactic of distributing a flyer saying someone's racist or sexist, or what, you know, I didn't see the flyers, but we heard the outcome of them. That is a interesting tactic. It's kind of a dangerous one to a certain degree, because you're going to have to defend yourself, and it could be seen as actually very I don't want to use legal terms, but it could cross the line if it's not framed correctly. So I don't know. We'll see if there's another group forming on the other side. We'll see what tomatoes they end up throwing at the NDP coalition.
Well, attack ads work. We've seen that at every level of government in countless campaigns. And that's really what this was. Whether they were flyers that ended up in your mailbox or the pseudo lawn signs that you saw driving along the side of the road, it was all attack-oriented messaging in whatever form it came through in. And that takes money and that takes organization. And yes, this is nothing new, and it's been done on both sides of the political spectrum. But I find it troubling when there is an entity that is doing something like that and then never has to answer for it. Because Lindsay, as you said, Anthony Furey had to answer for it on his side. He had to defend against the allegations and everything else. But the other candidates who were benefiting from it never got the flip side of the question, because they could say, well, I don't know who this organization is. It's not connected to my campaign in any way. They're just out there doing their thing while I'm reaping the benefits. Shh, inside voice. Don't say that out loud. Yeah.
But again, you can't blame the other candidates for what Progress Toronto has engaged in. I mean, so at some level, Anne-Marie, there's a level of community engagement here that we have not seen in municipal politics in a long time. We always complain about voter turnout. It was a pretty reasonable turnout for a by-election in the city of Toronto.
It's true. And I think groups like these are paying attention to municipal politics, where decisions that are made affect our daily lives more often than provincial or federal decisions. So I think people are paying attention to that. And say what you will about this group, the Progress Toronto, but it's the founder, Michelle, who's now, as Lindsay said, this chief of staff in the mayor's office, is brilliant. She's a brilliant strategist. She is young, she's brilliant, and many of the people that she brought into that group are like her. They're young, they're involved, they're very community driven, and ideologically driven, and that encourages me in and of itself, that people are really getting involved and recognize the importance of municipal politics. And there is a process in place for groups like this group, Progress Toronto, as well as Ontario Proud. They have to demonstrate certain things in order to be officially campaigning, not directly but indirectly, for candidates. There is a process. You have to have a certain amount of members, a certain amount of money, and that sort of thing. So whether or not those safeguards are enough, that's something to be looked into and explored. But it is interesting that people are getting much more involved in municipal politics. That's encouraging.
But isn't that the point, though, Brad, that they weren't expressly supporting one candidate, but they were arguing with the point of view of a particular candidate? So it's a nuanced distinction, but they were not lobbying on behalf of a campaign.
That, yes, it would appear so, and that Anthony Furey was the target. He, excuse me, he is, he's known. Anthony Furey is a known, was a known columnist who is a little further right than those at Progress Toronto, and so they targeted him. He made certain promises and has said certain things in the past, and they use that against him. And I think we're going to see that in the next federal election, certainly on the Conservative side. I think the niceties of politics, whether we like it or not, are a thing of the past. I'm all on board with the transparency piece, and I think it was a good point. I can't remember which of my friends here made it about Furey constantly having to answer for these charges, but nobody on the other side having to answer for the charges that they were making. So, all's fair in love and war, I guess.
Just to clarify one point, they sometimes do, they often do outwardly support to candidates. They did support Olivia during her most recent campaign. They didn't support, in this case, though, the interesting part is they didn't come out and support the candidate that won, but they were completely focused on Furey. So that was an interesting part.
Yeah, and the candidate that won got a plurality of the votes, interestingly.
Progress Toronto didn't endorse a specific candidate, but the former premier, who does live in the ward, but she got actively involved in it to the point of brokering a deal for 2 other competing left of center candidates to drop out and to give their support to Rachel Chernos-Lynn, who went on to win the seat. So back to Dave, your point about registration and lobbying, I'm curious to know what boxes Kathleen Wynne ticked in regard to that, because there's some serious political weight and influence being wielded in support of one candidate. How does that play into a municipal campaign field? I don't know the answer to it.
Well, just to clarify, Kathleen Wynne doesn't live in the ward anymore, but she did for sure.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it is Tim Hudak's out there knocking on doors and doing the same thing. So it's cutting both ways, and both campaigns saw the value in having, an A-list campaigner knocking on doors on their behalf.
Sure.
But let me get back to Anthony Furey. And, we've all encountered Anthony in various degrees over our careers in Toronto. Certainly I talked to him a lot when he was at the Sun and so on. Should he not have seen this coming, Bob? I mean, he already ran the mayor's campaign. He ran for mayor against Chow, and there was some of this bubbling around the surface already. This was an attempt to actually sort of stomp on any opportunity that he might have to ride a city council seat into the mayor's chair or into a mayoral campaign. Should he not have seen that coming?
Oh, I think he did. I think he was very well prepared for all of the various attack points against him, and certainly through experience learned from his mayoral run. He finished 4th in that contest and was roundly targeted on the same sort of hot button points that came up in this campaign. So I think he was well prepared for it. I don't think any of that caught him by surprise. I think what was surprising was the bigger issue that we're talking about a very organized third party that was clearly targeting his candidacy.
Yeah, well, and it'll be curious to see, for all of the things that Doug Ford wants to get involved in Toronto vis-a-vis, bike lanes and everything else. This is probably something that the creator of municipalities should be paying attention to, because they have to live by those rules, and they've been very strict in terms of, what their third party involvement in campaigns is, particularly around campaign time. Doesn't it not seem odd that we haven't had sort of anybody at the province stand up and say, hey, that's some serious shit going down in Toronto we need to deal with. That's not going to cost us $48 million to remove anyway.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all that they're not getting involved, because look at the attack ads that they run constantly. So I think that was their approach. It's just a bigger money approach. And it's more transparent in that who's actually hosting and paid for the ad, but you don't know where their money's all coming from too. They're, eventually you do, but not immediately. They do their fundraising. So I think it's just, I think the whole notion of, we saw it in the US a lot, and it's happening here in Canada. And now we're seeing it at the local level. And that's something I think new.
Well, again, I think it's new, but it's going to be new again, old again. We're going to see more of it, and we'll wait to see how, the right response. And I guess I'm not sure that that's the right response that we want. We're all agreed on. The circus has come to town. The parade continues south of the border. More and more of the cabinet announcements and the nominees. If it wasn't so serious, it would be funny. And I understand the concerns in terms of some of the nominations, the Gates nomination for AG, et cetera, in the Trump administration. But the one that really rung the bell and started the week off for the media, I guess over the weekend, was this picture of RFK with Don Jr., with Elon, with Johnson and Trump on the plane, and they're having the McDonald's hamburger, and everybody jumping up and down because RFK is going to be the guy who's going to take care of our health care, and here he is eating McDonald's as if that's a good thing for you. I get the meme in this, but Jesus Murphy, that turned into 6 hours straight of programming on CNN, Lindsay. I mean, what the hell?
There's so much, and I know we're going
They're
to talk
so
about
earnest. Jim Acosta is so freaking earnest in terms of, well,
Oh.
he's, she's seriously.
It's like a family Christmas photo almost. Like it looks staged.
Oh,
It's,
entirely.
you know, and our, you know, he's not only going to be the future health minister, but sorry, what's his official title now?
Health and Human Services Secretary.
Health and Human Services. Like he's burnt to a crisp. He looks like a French fry that's been under a heater for I don't know how long. I love McDonald's, so that's going to be my big stamp here. You put a cheeseburger with extra pickles in front of me, and I am a child. So I have no problem with them dining in this particular way. It's just what they're doing is they're mocking everything that came before them, and I think that's the joke. I mean, there's 5 white guys around a table in an airplane eating McDonald's and just having a gay old time, and it mocks everything that came before. It sets the stage for everything to come. It's a perfect pivot moment in time. It's a piece of art, that photo. I'm just going to leave it there.
And it was a private jet. I mean, let's punctuate it with that. It was a private jet.
Well, it's not economy on, you know, buy your own ticket airlines. It's you know, they're going in style. The McDonald's was delivered to the front door. Like the whole thing is just beautifully orchestrated, and it worries, you know, it worries the hell of me, because those are the players that are going to dictate health, finance, so much of our security. God knows one of them has their finger on the button pretty soon again, as they say. And, you know, ironically, one of them is one of 2. A friend and I were laughing about how you need 2 people to run an efficiency department. But, you know, the one of 2 of them who's going to control the data that is managed in the States, our information, how it's managed. And I don't mean our as in Canadian, but the royal hour. Yeah, it's perfectly mocking, and all it does is ask questions of what to come, and we don't know what's to come. So it's fascinating.
Oh, I don't know that we don't know what's to come, Brad.
I don't.
We know exactly what's coming, because this picture was trolling everybody who didn't vote for Trump.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. This is a master troll, if ever there was one. And I would go as far as to say that his cabinet picks are also a bit of a troll as well, right? Gates aside, we got Dr. Oz now doing something. We got, you know, all these guys from Fox. I jokingly said yesterday that I think, you know, agricultural secretary might be old McDonald. I mean, who knows what's to come next, right? And so. Yeah, it's just if CNN were, you know, I'm sure they went all in. I've tried to wean myself off of cable news since the election, but if they went all in on this picture, I'm not surprised in the least. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that this is bread and butter for cable news networks. This kind of thing, and Christ, we're only 2 weeks into since the election. January 20th is light years away. God knows what we're going to see next. It ain't over by a long shot, Dave. I mean, I don't know who knows what'll be next. You can't even predict it. You can't write this.
I got to wonder whether or not, you know, the new education secretary is going to pick up on the EIEIO, and that's all going to be in terms of the, may not eliminate education, but they'll eliminate parts of the alphabet.
Eliminate certain vowels, maybe, yeah.
Right.
Vowels are so
there. What's her name?
So
McMahon
2022
from the WWE family. What the hell?
Yeah.
If it wasn't. Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say there was only 1 or maybe 2 things missing from that photo. This and this.
Right.
That is what that was. And
it is.
I also thought that photo is the visual equivalent of Don Cherry's speech at Rob Ford's inauguration as mayor. The put that in your pipe and smoke it, you left-wing kooks. That was the visual
Commie Pinkos,
equivalent of
that.
Yeah.
Well, and for those of you who are listening along on Apple, Bob was flipping you double birds there. So just
Yes.
just to make the point. Now, and again, I say if it wasn't so serious, it would be funny, Anne Marie. Here's the problem. And I started with CNN. Everybody in the media glommed onto this and turned it into memes, and again had the same sort of visceral "what the hell are you doing" reaction. And the media has kind of been looped into this trolling in as much as they've taken the bait, right? They are doing exactly what Team Trump wants them to do, first of all. And it's expressly why Trump won, is because they took the bait during the campaign and really didn't kind of get down with it, and as did the Democrats.
Yeah.
He's working the plan.
Oh, I completely agree. I can just hear the discussions before that picture was taken. And I actually, Bob, looked for double birds in there. I was looking at their hands to see if they were sneaking in birds in there. But I think they purposely did it to poke the media and to keep the discussion focused on, isn't this all funny? Because that's what they want people to think. This is all funny. And if we learned anything through the pandemic, is that what happens around the world in respect to public health matters to each of us. We saw that. We saw we couldn't isolate ourselves as Canadians. And if JFK does something ridiculous, which for him would be just kind of a midway point by saying, let's make vaccinations all voluntary instead of mandatory. That could be something I think he would do, because he would see it as being reasonable, where it's not reasonable at all. And we'll have polio again. And those illnesses that they get and they give to other vulnerable people will travel from country to country to country. And it is so serious and life-threatening. I think they were intentionally wanted to keep it light. And isn't this all fun?
Well, except that the nominee for the FCC, to lead the FCC, is already on the campaign to be anti-censorship, is to be cracking down on anybody who starts talking about misinformation and disinformation. It's almost as if you're going to make it illegal to label something as disinformation. So, again, if it weren't so bloody serious, it might be funny. So I hope you all enjoy your holidays this Christmas, because when we come back in the new year, you're going to want to buckle up. Yeah. And one of the things that happened as a result of all of this, and of course Elon Musk figured prominently in that photograph, and will be one of the, as Lindsay said, one of the two individuals involved in making sure government runs more efficiently. Not quite sure how that happened, but the migration post-election from X to Bluesky Social, and Don Lemon made a big deal about it, how he was leaving and moving on, and he just took no end of ridicule, as was appropriate. But you know what? I kind of went in and checked it out just to see what it's all about. It looks a whole lot like Twitter in the old days, which is kind of cool. And the idea that, you can kind of have a civil conversation. Yeah, I don't know. It's still social media, so I'm going to hang on and wait to see what happens there. But they are gaining a significant number of users, apparently 18 million, according to Forbes, since the election. And, I've dipped in, found people who are on the site. Brad, I know you're there. You were probably there for a while. You were certainly there before I was.
I've been there for about 9 months when it first emerged, and just to check it out. I mean, I'm on Threads as well. I mean, I think without overstating the obvious, I think we need to be super careful about, going over to a platform that is just going to be an echo chamber, say, of the left, for example. And because and maybe that's all and maybe that's what you want, and you just want to have a pleasant conversation. Then I'm all for that, of course. But those, who are yearning for the days of yore and being nostalgic about Twitter, I mean, let's give our heads a shake. Twitter has always been a cesspool of toxicity and hate and harassment. I can vouch for that in the various roles I've had at the TTC in the city of Toronto. People can be really, really shitty on all platforms. So people are decamping Twitter mostly because of Musk, I suppose, and we'll have to see how that all plays out. I think this bromance between Musk and Trump will last only for so long, and I'm really curious to see what happens after that. But if you don't want to be on Twitter, then just don't go on Twitter. I mean, I don't know. I deleted my Twitter account about 18 months ago because I had retired from my previous roles at the city and the TTC, and yet I still got hate tweets about shit that was happening that I had nothing to do with. And I said, fuck this. I don't need this bullshit in my life. And then sadly I got rid of 30,000 followers. And then I decided I wanted to go into business in the communications world and figured out, shit, I need Twitter, but it was too late. So I'm trying to build up my my Twitter following. If anybody's interested in following me, you can find me at Brad Ross Comms.
Well, Lindsay, that makes the point, though, right? We become so ingrained in our use of social media, whether it is to, communicate with friends and family, or to actually promote an idea or the podcast or whatever it happens to be. We're not in a place where we can actually function effectively in this world in many ways without some exposure to social media.
What's become abundantly clear, I think, is that the purpose of we layered on our own hopes and dreams for each of these channels, right? We hoped that Twitter, and in the early days, was going to be this hub that would bring us all the great news and would connect us. We'd find real-time information. We, previously had different hopes and dreams for Facebook. I find myself without Facebook happily for years now. That was not a happy place, I think, for a lot of humans to be in. LinkedIn, I love, and it's because the kind of conversation and information exchange is different. These social platforms we're talking about, it's evident that this is not where you should be getting your news from, right? Anyone who's getting their news from any of these channels is fishing in a very limited pool that will have algorithms all over it, and you're not going to be getting balanced news. I hope people know that, even though 35% of the world now is getting its, or youth rather, the world under 25 is getting its news from TikTok, which is frightening. These other platforms give us access to something. For me personally, what I love about Twitter, what I never found in Threads, and now on my Virgin voyage here with Bluesky, what I love is the real-time access to things that are happening, so that you, if there is a protest downtown or a speech or a sporting event, you can plug into kind of that in the moment thing. You won't be getting the real life analysis or news, but the thing is happening. I love that. And it has failed over the X platform because of the amount of bots. I mean, you're just constantly being scrolled, and bots coming at you left, right, and center. So it's dangerous and it's gross, and I don't like the way people communicate. So I don't know. You've got to use these different channels you've got to be conscious about how you're using the channels. And then for clients, if you're in the communications world, how you then pivot, you put paid behind them or don't, for different reasons. There's a different purpose for each one.
Well, and I think that's one of those things that we all take for granted, Bob. Given the work that we do, the world that we live in, how our brains are wired, we all understand that each one of these platforms has a different audience, which means it has a different voice, which means it has a different opportunity or a likelihood of this kind of response. And I don't think that, generally speaking, that has been conveyed or understood well enough by people who just sign up and use them. And so then they find themselves, in places where it's not at all comfortable, or it's bullying, or whatever the case may be. But I don't know how you get around that, though.
Yeah, I think you're right that the vast majority have no sense of what the alignments are or what the environments are on these. with respect to Bluesky, I mean, Brad, I tip my hat to you that you knew about it and were on it 18 months ago, because for me, this is a brand new thing, because in my other channels, my other feeds, I've seen nothing but I'm deleting X. You can find me on Bluesky. Here's my coordinates. And I'm like, oh, what's that all about? And as is typical for me, I tend to be a late adopter of new platforms, because my first reaction is, great, there's one more thing I've got to check now and look at and keep up with. And I got enough of that already in my life. But I will probably make my way over there. Dave, to your point about alignments of platforms, and as Lindsay said, each one is an opportunity for those of us in the communications world. And do you put clients on there? Do you look at amplifying with paid? All of those things. Excellent questions. It's no different than, do you put them on CNN or on Fox in the American equivalent? Where is the audience that you're trying to connect with ideally, and what would the reception be like on it? With respect to the exodus from X, as it were, a lot of that, of course, is political reaction because of Musk and his relationship with Trump, and so that's the Republican platform, and he's not my president, and I hate Musk, and so I'm leaving there. But also is what was just talked about, the change in the tone and the environment on X since Musk took it over. Now concerns about how your information is being utilized, and explicitly stated that we're going to feed your stuff into AI platforms in the name of further platform development and enhancements. There's a big brother aspect to that is freaking a lot of people out, just like people who have left TikTok because of its direct links into the Chinese government. So this is now, I think, kind of a new nuance in social media, is who is behind it, who is controlling it, what are they doing with it. And Bluesky's point of differentiation right now is, we won't do any of that, and we're telling you that explicitly. That's in our terms of agreement and our mission statement and everything else, that this is a clean environment that way. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be a bunch of humans on social media. And as Lindsay said,
there's no cure for human nature, right?
We all had high hopes every time the last new thing came along that it would be different, but it's still going to be a bunch of keyboard warriors in there, as well as nice people like us.
Well, but it's worth noting that this, back to your initial point about Brad being the early adopter, it was launched in 2019 by Jack Dorsey, who's the guy who started Twitter. So, there was some intention there, I think, Anne-Marie, to say, we can bring this back to life, that there is a nice, warm, fuzzy place to be on the internet. The thing that concerns me is that only months ago he bailed on the company. Now it's being run by somebody else. So I think, oh, really? Now that it's up and running.
I think I joined Twitter 15 years ago. And it had become, I wasn't targeted as much as Brad was, but I was targeted in my role. Because it's transit, and people are always mad at transit, and I still get hateful stuff sent me about transit. So, but often it's about the TTC. It's not about even the right company. So, but it was something as part of my job. I had to be on top of the news every minute and breaking news. And Twitter, especially initially, was really good at feeding you news. Not that they gave the news in Twitter, they just linked you to the news. So, but that's changed significantly. So I'm pretty much off Twitter, and that's a relief. Reporters still try and reach me through there. I'm not sure why they haven't paid attention, but I was hopeful about Threads. It hasn't kind of panned out. They haven't been able to get their algorithms right, or their timelines. You can't follow a correct timeline, and the news media just didn't take on the Threads so much. So I'm a little hopeful about Bluesky, because they seem to have figured out a few things right away, but we'll see. I'm very cynical when it comes to channels now, but it's also, as a communicator, and that's still my job, I have to be aware and very familiar with all of these channels to be able to provide good advice for my customers. But the other thing that I am a real proponent of, and I hope the schools are doing, and I worry they're not doing it enough, is about digital education. So our young people are learning to differentiate all these sites and what you use them for. Like, for example, I just use Facebook, so it reminds me of my huge family's birthdays. If I didn't have that, I would miss birthdays all the time. So it reminds me of birthdays. That's all I use it for now. Yeah. But and Instagram is just to post pretty pictures I like. So, and look at other pretty pictures. But it's really, I think digital education is really key when it comes to social media and what's out there and what's coming, because God knows what else is coming.
Well, dare I say, it was much and all as there was a point where Twitter really worked. I think the turning point was when it killed Gordon Lightfoot. So that was a little premature. But, even to the point where I think we're seeing an evolution in that media writ large, and you got to give them credit. At least they're responding to the needs and the expectations of an audience, which legacy media has not done. And that's why they have suffered because of the various platforms. Lindsay?
Yeah, well, no, that's interesting because on the little bit I've dipped my toe into the Bluesky world, I understand they take a federated approach, right? So that you can inoculate yourself a little bit about where your data is stored, so that if true, in terms of how this all eventually is made manifest, that's a huge defense against the current X, or what Twitter was, because all the data isn't in one spot or pooled. You can choose your customer feeds. There's no privacy settings. My understanding is also they, I don't know if kill is the right term, but when a bot appears, they get rid of that particular setting or user. So it seems like there's a cleansing of the system that's built in. That's huge customer service. I imagine from governments right on down to users. That's huge. To your point about legacy media, they're struggling with bigger demons. It's not an algorithm, it's a journalist, and it's a point of view, and it's an editorial board, and it's the funders, and it is a empty newsroom, a lack of budget. Those are things that are institutional and permeate the organization, just like a business. So I think they're different challenges, but to your point of expeditiously addressing them, the media was, years and years and years late to the game in terms of acknowledging its own faults, as well as its own potential.
Well, my own marching order in terms of why I would have moved over to Bluesky is just it's not Meta and it's not Musk, and I think that for me was just a place where I wanted to put my attention and just curiosity to see how that's playing out. Before we go, I don't know, this is probably something that you could, real value might be $5, but it's going to go for $1 million at auction. We're talking about a banana that is duct taped to the wall as art, and it's expected that it's going to sell for $1 million at auction. That's got to be some special kind of banana, Brad.
Dave, I could suspend a coffee bean over my coffee maker and call it Bean There, and wait until somebody calls me an artist. But in the meantime, I'm just an eccentric waiting for Sotheby's to call. So I think this is hilarious. I mean, but I do, on a little more serious of a note, I think that the art world does suffer from, or perhaps it cultivates a reputation of being inaccessible to the average person. You don't get this, Philistine, and to take this a step further. I think, this kind of thing where this art sells for this kind of money, and you really don't understand contemporary art if you're going to complain about this, but it might help explain a little bit about the MAGA movement and, how they're fine with dogs playing poker. Thank you very much. I don't need $1 million banana on my wall.
Well, but Lindsay, the point that Brad starts, the Sotheby's guy, if you heard him interviewed, he is so deeply invested in the importance of this piece of art, and that the artist has sold 24 different pieces that have gone for more than $1 million at auction. This is changing the world.
Well, see, and I might be the outlier on this panel. I love this. I think I am all in when it comes to modern art. It queries.
Have I got some nectarines for you, Lindsay?
Well, bring over your produce. I've got rolls of duct tape. I'm going to make a fortune with you. I think this is performance art. And it's not dissimilar to what's happened decades and decades and decades before, where you put the viewer and the artist in opposition and contradiction or engagement. And it's exactly what we're doing today. When you show that photo of the boys on the plane with their Big Macs, it's the exact same thing. It probes, where's the power? What is art? What is beautiful? What's important? And it's a mockery of everything else around us. It's doing the exact same thing, with a price tag, frankly, that's far less than what we have south of the border. I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
Anne Marie's shaking her head, going,
well,
"Run,
right.
you're full of shit."
I've got a bin full of bananas that are, it's the old line about, we get to an age where we're going to have artwork now that we don't want to buy green artwork. We're going to have to make sure it's just at its right point so that we can consume it in time.
Yeah, because you got to change that banana. It's just that's the artist intended.
Where's red green on this? I mean, he missed the boat entirely.
What's it supposed to mean? There are rotten bananas in the air. I smell farts. What's it mean? I don't know. I am not one for art much. I don't have a good eye. I like photography better. But how much disposable money do people really have, and where is the economic crisis that we're all in? Mind you, I was thinking that about the Taylor Swift concerts. What the hell are people? I thought we were all in economic crisis, that people have a lot of disposable money, it seems. But the rotten banana really takes the rotten
That's
banana.
The performance of it, right? Like all the questions that you're asking, that's exactly what it's probing.
Well, except, Bob, that
great.
if you buy that for $1 million, you're going to have to replace the banana and the duct tape on your own after you've spent $1 million.
But you're licensed by the artist to be able to do that and keep it going and not violate the work of art. So it keeps going on with the blessing and the authenticity certified by the artist. I think Yoko Ono is kicking herself in the ass right now, going, how did I miss this? This is genius. But to Lindsay's point, I mean, Andy Warhol was so out there when he first was doing Campbell's soup cans and stuff, and it's become iconic and enduring. I don't think this will so much. I put this up there with you remember the work of the painted work in the National Gallery of Canada, The Voice of Fire, which was a giant vertically oriented rectangle of 3 stripes of solid color that was worth a gazillion dollars as well. It all makes me think back to the late great Robin Williams' immortal line from the 80s when he said, "Cocaine is God's way of telling you you're making too much money." I think this is the modern day update on that.
But Dave, I just want to, I get Lindsay's point. I don't disagree. I think art plays a very, very important role in the world. I think it's interesting, the art world itself, that industry, if I could call it that, And the quotes from that guy at Sotheby's, that's what, from the story that you sent, really sort of tipped me over the edge on the sort of almost nonsensical part of it all, that you just, if you don't get this, then you're not part of our world. And they make art then inaccessible, and they make it difficult for people to appreciate, because if you don't get a banana taped to a wall, you must be you're a Philistine, and I think that there is the problem with the art world.
So
yeah, but Mr. Sotheby's getting a healthy slice when this thing sells, right? So let's keep that in mind.
Apparently, Monet was an asshole too, though. If you read the story, right? So that
sure, but his painting's going up for auction for like $60 million tomorrow or later this week. So I've been to Giverny. I have seen the canvases and so on. I get that one. All right. But, what do you bet? What do you want to bet? That the buyer of this piece of art is anonymous?
It'll be a monkey for sure.
Curious George has put in a bid for $1.2 million. All right.
Maybe Banksy will buy it and put it through a shredder, and that'll be the end of it.
Perfect. Now that would be a statement, right?
Yeah.
Bob Reed, Lindsay Broadhead, Brad Ross, and Anne Marie Akins. Thanks, guys. This has been fun, and we'll do it again in a couple of weeks right here on Now and Next. And just a reminder, if you want to leave us a message, please do that. You can check the show notes out. We've got a talk back feature here. So if you want to leave a message about anything we've talked about, if you think you're in the market for $1 million banana taped to the wall, let us know, because we'd like to talk to you for sure. You wouldn't be any anonymity around any of that. And this week, by the way, we'll also be featuring, of course, Kathleen Wynne, Tim Hudak, John Wright, and Keith Leslie in our regular panel on the Ledge. And that drops wherever you're listening to this podcast or right here on this YouTube channel. I'm Dave Trafford for Story Studio Network.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Now and Next is Story Studio Network's flagship podcast, produced by our chief executive producer, Dave Trafford, and supported by our entire SSN team, including our senior producers, Becky Coles and Jen Hudson, our technical producer and audio editor, Mike Trutler. Jamie Nickerson is our production manager, and our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Also, I'm Aaron Trafford, Queen of the Universe.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.